I never said to mandate the vaccine. If you don't believe in science, you shouldn't be a nurse. What does a patient's choice have to do with anything? Okay, so let's break it down. First, a patient's choice does have something to do with it, because if every patient that comes into an ER can, the only time a patient we can make somebody take a medicine is if they're violent if they're trying to hurt themselves or somebody else. Otherwise, no matter how much you need the med, you can refuse it, and a nurse has an obligation to respect that. They may want to try to talk you into taking it, but ultimately they have to respect that decision. Now, in communist countries, the government makes that decision for you. So that's what I was trying to say, is that the kind of nursing you want, where you don't get a choice anymore, and the nurse, because the nurse is being controlled by the government, says, no, I have to give this to you, it doesn't matter what you want? So, and here's the reason, like this, everybody has turned this thing into a black and white issue, as if you didn't take the vaccine, it means you're anti-vax, or that you're anti-science. No. But science, that said though, science needs to stay in their lane. Science went way outside their lane in 2020. Science became a dictator. And they based it all around that it was about your health. And then they went so far, and I'm saying this as somebody who's a pretty good psych nurse and recognizes patterns. They went so far as to turn the public against anybody who didn't get a vaccine. Some of the public, anyway. Because they convinced you that you were a good person if you went and got a vaccine. But do you realize those same people that told you that had locked the elderly in their nursing home rooms for 2 years? That's how much they cared. So do you think the people that didn't care should really be telling you that in order to be a caring person, you have to get vaccinated? If you're vaccinated, then you're fine. It was all about control. That's why it went from 1 mask to then 2 masks. That's why they put circles in all those spots, because they were going to tell you where to stand, how many masks you were going to wear, if you were allowed to leave your house, if you could earn a living. That is a dictatorship, one that's being used on the guise of we're coming in the name of science. The issue I have with it, because I don't take the flu vaccine. I mean, it was years ago the last time I took one, but it has nothing to do with so much science as it does. And it's a faith, for faith reasons. I don't like to say religious because I'm not a churchgoer, but see, God got me sober. No science, no doctor, nobody can do anything about that. But I got sober and I found God in a 12-step room. And walked with that God every day for 30 plus years. So I know the kind of healing that God can do. That said, that doesn't mean that if I'm hurt or I need to go to the doctor, I wouldn't. But when it came to the vaccine, no, that's a personal choice. I should be allowed that choice. So science went out of their lane. But they've been getting out of their lane because they went into this lane where through the years they've convinced people that say, oh, trust the science, that God doesn't exist. Well, I know he does. And if they really wanted to look at evidence, then they would have years ago, because AA's been around since the late 30s, and it's in every country in the world, all over. It has a huge success rate. Most mental health professionals don't know that. I mean, it has a more success rate than doesn't. I mean, they don't keep any records, but it's still going and it's self-supporting. But the science always doesn't like that, because that's actually, if you want to talk about evidence, that's evidence. That's people all over the world that have recovered from a disease of alcoholism, and the founders figured out what it was, and it was a spiritual malady, meaning a spiritual void. That's the condition. That's why no science will ever come up with a drug that'll fix it. I give those drugs that they try. They don't. The people go back to drinking. Maybe it can help with some, but even that, no. The founders of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1939, they figured out, because one of them was a doctor, a surgeon, and the other was an accountant, and they were in and out of sanitariums. So the science they love to rip on Alcoholics Anonymous while saying, well, it sort of helps. Because science can say whatever it wants to promote something or disgrace something. And I looked at enough of their articles, and they don't even understand how AA works. But more than that, they don't understand that that it's a spiritual condition. So, and they're never interested in wanting to understand that, and that's fine. But then they need to stay in their lane, because just because the science people don't want to believe in God doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. Again, they haven't been able to prove that God doesn't exist. You have just some people that are scientists that come along and give an opinion, and then everyone wants to say, oh, they're a scientist, they know. Well, no, any alcoholic in this world that's recovered knows absolutely 100% that there is a God, and he plays a very big role for those that want him to play a role in all our lives. So science got out of their lane in 2020. And then they got so out of their lane that they started telling people that those people that didn't get vaccinated don't care. No, it was quite the opposite. I'm not saying the people that got vaccinated didn't care. I'm just saying they've been using all of us. I mean, using us to make one side turn against the other. I could care less if you want to get a vaccine or not. But nobody should be allowed to make me take one. And yet I've heard all the arguments, well, if you're going to work in healthcare, it didn't used to be that way. It didn't used to be, like still, we don't, now all they've done is taken something flu that's been around for decades that every nurse has encountered in their career. And now they're saying that if you don't get a vaccine, you need to wear the yellow star, really, it's the mask, so that everybody knows you didn't get vaccinated. We didn't used to do shit like that. So that's science going way out of its lane, where it's become used as a political entity. That's the reason why you have your Robert F. Kennedy that wrote the book about Fauci. And you'd think, I mean, he's a smart man, okay? He's been on the far left for a long time. So, you know, I believe in real science, and I believe in science that stays in its lane. And most importantly, the science I believe in is science that actually cures things. There's more diseases today than we had 50 years ago. There's more viruses today than we had 20 years ago. How many of these viruses, because we have worldwide media, after COVID came, was then the Alpha, the Delta, and it was just fear-mongering, wanting to keep people in this desperate fear place. And you don't have to believe that, but I'm telling you, as a psych nurse, I watched the media. Let's say this, at the very least, they were absolutely irresponsible in the reporting because they were fear-mongering. But the fact is, I can believe in science, although in the past few years it's been harder to because of them getting out of their lane. But I can believe in science, but also decide because of my personal faith reasons that no, I trust in God on some things. And when it comes to vaccines, it's an area that that's the science that's helped me more than anybody. I'm not saying that God doesn't want science. I'm just saying they need to stay in their lane. And in a free country, never ever should science step in and start telling people that they have to get a vaccine and then belittling those people because they don't. You guys turn this into a black and white issue, and all you should look at is how science has never once cured a disease. And now in 2024, when we should be so advanced scientifically and not have so many diseases and viruses, now we have a ton of more diseases than we did ever, and viruses, and at the same time, not one cure. That makes it kind of hard to believe in science.